Welcome to CMN 304, Writing Your Novel, and this is week 7, workshop part 1. So I'm in the little corner there. You probably can't see some of the words on the slides, but I'll move them around and I'll post the slides too. So I hope you're enjoying this online course, and as last week, you'll have to pause the video to do the exercises, and this should take 90 minutes to 2 hours. So let's begin. Now, what we're doing this week is we're looking at postmodernism, and we're looking at some texts which you've looked at already to see what this actually is. So the first thing I'd like you to do is, without looking up the word, just what are your associations with postmodernism? What do you think it means? Okay, so just jot down, free write some ideas down, and let's see what you have. Of course, we can't share this in class. You could share this online. You could share this in Blackboard. But I'd like to talk about postmodernism in a few minutes. So I hope you've written down some ideas. Here are some definitions. And of course, the definitions are themselves problematic. So I'll go through them one by one. Maybe the best definition is this: that postmodernism is impossible to define, because a definition of postmodernism is it has no definition. So I'm not sure what you came up with your definitions, but here is the official definition: a late 20th century movement characterized by broad skepticism, subjectivism, or relativism. Lots of isms here. A general suspicion of reason and an acute sensitivity to the role of ideology in asserting and maintaining political and economic power. That's Encyclopedia Britannica. Phew. Okay. It's also, we're talking about pendulum swings. Let's think about it in this way: that we started swinging from romantic to realist, to modernist, to minimalist, etc., etc. And John Barth claimed that by the 1960s, modernism had been the literature of exhaustion. We've exhausted that particular movement. And so we needed a literature of replenishment. And we entered this new era, which is postmodernism. Of course, the definition post obviously means after. So after modernism. The first person to coin the phrase postmodernism was Jean-Francois Lyotard in 1979. And he said it's basically an incredulity towards meta-narratives. Okay? Postmodernism undermines certainty and meaning and reveals our loss of faith in the big lies we told ourselves, such as religion, science, Marxism, liberalism, even modernism, even postmodernism. Anything with a capital letter, anything was an ism. In other words, that skepticism is about not trusting those big narratives that people tell us, that there's an all-embracing truth. This is how the world is. So that's probably a definition that would work well with me. Frederick Jameson talked about it as the cultural logic of late capitalism, okay, post-industrial, multinational consumer capitalism. Okay, so he said the main characteristic of this new postmodernism was the abolition of history. Okay, we're getting quite theoretical here. And you're starting to think, what has this got to do with my writing? Let's go back, actually. We probably need to answer this question first. Oh, it's obscured by my face. The question is, how do we write in a postmodern age? So, in other words, we have to take into account that we're living in a postmodern, or maybe postmodern age. An age, as you're probably seeing, post-truth age. Okay? So, I think we need to know what we're getting ourselves in for by being writers in this particular century. Okay, a postmodernist would have everything in quotes. Okay, reality is in quotes. In fact, most words are in quotes. Language is in quotes. Now, why we're putting in quotes is because we're suspicious about that word. Okay, so we put things like reality in quotes because reality is not always what we think it is, or truth in quotes. Like someone saying, here is the truth. If we're postmodernists, we'll be skeptical about that. Okay? And here's what writers do. The postmodernist writer holds up a mirror to nature Remember, that's realism. You're copying nature. But we don't write about nature. We write about the mirror. We write about how we are reflecting nature. That's what we're looking at, the processes. That's like modernism in a way. But now we're saying there's no reality or nature to reflect. We're just looking at how we construct and create. Okay. So Richard Rorty, for example, debunks the realist myth that language refers to and represents reality outside itself, a mirror of nature. Like our words do not reflect nature one-to-one. They're basically a closed system. If you take a dictionary, for example, and you look up a word, you'll get another word. And then if you look up that word, you get another word, and you get another word. And eventually you'll probably get the same word you started with. Okay? You don't actually have something referring to an object. Okay? So, what Rorty talks about ironism, the awareness of this contingent position in history. So we need to be skeptical and ironic. Okay? Stand back from the cultural spider webs we think of as normal. Okay. So then we get to Derrida and we get to post-structuralism, where Derrida himself says there's no outside text, there's nothing outside language. If you don't have language, there's nothing there, which is a pretty radical statement to make. But what we're going to do today is look at how we can apply this as writers. Now, the main concept that we're going to look at is that, you've probably heard of this, the death of the author. And postmodernism is bad news for authors who still believe they have agency and control over their text, who believe in the myth that authors actually write their own books and have control of meaning and words. So it's Roland Barthes who argued in an essay called Death of an Author that the author's intention and context is irrelevant because the words belong to the culture. The way it's read, it doesn't matter what you write. It's the reader who's going to create meaning, not you. And you're just an unconscious or dead conduit. Okay? So, for example, let's look at a novel by John Fowles, The French Lieutenant's Women, which is a novel that you must read because it does a lot in terms of breaking the myths of realism and modernism, and it's a postmodern novel. So Fowles is, at the beginning of the novel, a realist, right? He's writing a Victorian novel. But then as he writes the novel, the characters get out of control, and he starts to lose control of what they do. In fact, one of the characters, he doesn't know where they are at the moment. So he's losing the control that an author has over his story. So if we get to chapter 13, I'll read this for you. I do not know. The story I'm telling you is all imagination. These characters I create never existed outside my own mind. If I've pretended until now to know my characters' minds and innermost thoughts, it's because I'm writing just as I've assumed some of the vocabulary and voice of a convention universally accepted at the time of my story, that the novelist stands next to God. He may not know all, yet he tries to pretend that he does. But I live in the age of Alain Robbe-Grillet and Roland Barthes. If this is a novel, it cannot be a novel in the modern sense of the word. Now, why I put this in, it's important because as writers, we're writing into this context that readers are aware, they're ironic about reality and post-truth. So we can't, again, be realists. We can't write a realist novel and expect people to see this as a mirror of reality. So the good news about being a writer and a postmodernist is that postmodern writing is fun. So be prepared today to enter the fun house, wander the labyrinths of language, and self-reflect in the hall of mirrors. Okay, and we're going to play. So postmodern writing is playful, parodic, it's a parody, it's ironic, it's humorous, and it's less about constructing objective reality and more about its own creative processes. I find this is a relief. Writers can play with innovative forms and styles, such as the following, and we'll go through each one. We'll do an exercise in each one and see what you do with this. So postmodernism can be daunting, okay, but it also is fun. So let's start playing and see how far we get. So, unpronounceable word, poemina, sounds like a Mexican dish. I think that's no, anyway. So, What is this? Poiamina. It's a description of self-conscious metafiction. And we're going to look at an aspect of postmodernism next time. We're going to look at metafiction in particular. But this is writing a story where we are aware that we are writing a story. So let me give you an example of this type of writing. Here's Tim O'Brien, his story, The Things They Carried. And of course, each thing I mentioned, I think you must go and read because they're brilliant stories. So this is a war story about Vietnam. But he's not writing about Vietnam. He's writing about how to write about a story about Vietnam. You can tell a true war story by the questions you ask. Someone tells a story, let's say, and afterward you ask, is it true? And if the answer matters, you've got your answer. For example, we've all heard this one. 4 guys go down a trail. A grenade sails out. 1 guy jumps on it, takes a blast, saves his 3 buddies. Is it true? The answer matters. You'd feel cheated if it's untrue or if it never happened. Without the grounding reality, it's just a trite bit of puffery, pure Hollywood, untrue in the way all things such stories are untrue. Yet even if it did happen, and maybe it did, anything's possible, even then you know it can't be true because a true war story does not depend on that kind of truth. Happeningness is irrelevant. A thing may happen and be a total lie. Another thing may not happen and be truer than the truth. For example, 4 guys go out down a trail. Grenade sails out. 1 guy jumps on it, takes the blast, but it's a killer grenade. Everybody dies anyway. Before they die, though, one of the dead guys said, What do you do that for? And the jumper says, story of my life, man. The other guy starts to smile, but he's dead. That's a true story that never happened. Okay, think about that a bit. Here's another story by Jorge Luis Borges. I can't speak Spanish, can I? Where it's about a writer who suspects that someone else is writing a story. Okay, the other one, the one called Borges, is the one things happen to. I walked through the streets of Buenos Aires and stopped for a moment, perhaps mechanically now, to look at the arch of an entrance hall and grillwork on the gate. I know of Borges from the Mail and see his name on a list of professors or in a biographical dictionary. I like hourglasses, maps, 18th century typography, the taste of coffee, prose of Stevenson. He shares these preferences, but in a vain way that turns them into the attributes of an actor. It would be an exaggeration to say that ours is a hostile relationship. I let myself go on living so that Borges may contrive his literature, and this literature justifies me. I don't know which of us has written this page. Okay, think about that he's written there. Interesting. So what it's doing is playing, and it's destabilizing our view of reality, of what a true story is, of who you are. Okay. So this is the person who thinks he's being written about by a writer, which is himself. Okay. So let's try that. Let's try that exercise. Now, so you're going to write the beginning of a story that is about writing a story that exposes or questions the false dichotomies between fiction and reality. Okay, so you start writing a story, then start questioning, are you describing what's really happening? Or maybe you're not telling the truth, or maybe it's not what you think it is. Okay, so that's one way you can do it. An easier example, if you want to try this other way, is to write a story in which the author is a character, or the character is the author. Okay, that's a lot of fun. John Fowles does it in The French Lieutenant's Woman. His character's on a train, and he looks up and he sees the author staring at him. He says, why is he staring at me? And the author's thinking, I don't understand this character. So we put the author in the story, okay? Or maybe the character is writing the story. Very interesting stuff. So try that for 5 minutes, and then we'll come back. It'll be the end of this video, part 1, and we'll start with video part 2. Thank you.